Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Sales Players Podcast.
Hello, everybody. This is David Craig White, your podcast host, as usual. And today I'm delighted to share this podcast with Steve Hall. Steve is a leading authority in the world of executive sales coaching. He does that for leaders in the APAC regions and North America and Canada. Steve, you can correct me afterwards if that's incorrect. And before that, he's had a pretty extensive sales career, let's say that. I think in regards to sales players terms, Steve, you're definitely one of those who would come under a legend status. So, Steve, welcome to the show, first and foremost. Thanks for joining us.
Good day, mate, as we say down here. Although, as you know, I'm a plum originally.
Indeed. So, Steve's based in, you're based in Sydney, right, Steve? I
am indeed. I would argue with the description of a legend, possibly a leg end, but certainly not a legend. Just a very old guy that's done a lot of stuff.
Yep, indeed. That's what we would class as a legend in the sales players categories, at least. So, Steve, today we're going to talk about and debate a little on the topic of if SDRs should be paid commission on deals. But before we do that, I just wanted to list off a few jobs for you to see whether you recognize these and where these came from. Barman, bricklayer, motorway worker, waiter, bookkeeper, builder's laborer, and there's quite a few more. I'm guessing you know where they came from because I pulled them off some of the list of jobs you did earlier in your career a few moons ago. Before you actually got into sales, which is always interesting. It kind of makes you, it kind of in my heart, because I think that's where I came from, like not being somebody who's come from an educated background or whatnot and done quite a few other jobs before that. I can relate to that a lot. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of how did you, from doing all those things, how did you actually end up in sales and get your first sales job?
Well, look, I like doing things I enjoy. I like going to football matches. I like drinking beer. When I was a student, I liked smoking drugs. And in order to do those things, you have to have money. So my philosophy always was, if there were two choices, one was do without the things you like, and the other was earn some money. I always went for the earn some money. Yeah. So when I was at school, when I was a student, because I went to Bristol University, and then after I left and got other jobs, I did a lot of part-time holiday jobs as well as I didn't get my first proper job until I was about 25. So, in my first 24 years, but with school and part-time jobs, I did a lot of different jobs. If you ever drive along the M4 from London to Bristol and come to the Hungerford turnoff, I worked on that bit of the motorway there when it was being built, which shows just how old I am. I think the most exotic jobs I had were probably a guillotine operator, but that wasn't heads, that was sheet metal. And I did work as a croupier in a casino in Bristol, which I worked as a clerk from 9 till 5, and then I went to work in the casino from 9 till 4 a.m. And 3 days a week, and that was quite tiring, but it was quite fun too.
Yeah, no doubt.
And then I got to about 25, and and I came to the conclusion I should probably get a proper job, and so. I was living in a shared flat in Royal York Crescent in Bristol, and one of my flatmates was a medical student, and I saw this ad in the Telegraph, and I don't normally read the Telegraph because it's a rag, but I used to like the crossword, and I had an ad for a medical rep, and I said to my mate, "Oh, what's a medical rep?" He said, "Oh, it's a great job to get a company car." So okay, mind you, I hadn't passed my driving license, so I had to pass between getting accepted for the job and doing the training. I had to actually go out and pass my driving license. So I rocked up at this hotel in Bristol, and this guy said, "Have you got a degree?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Okay, well, we've got a training program starting in January." This is about November. So that was my interview. It took about 3 minutes because they were looking for people with degrees. I mean, mine was a crap degree, and so I became a medical rep for 3.5 years, and they did a decent amount of training, and that's sort of a sales job and sort of not. there's no prospecting. You'd have to go out and find prospects because you've got a list of all the doctors in your area, and you don't take orders because you basically talk to them about the drugs you sell and hope they prescribe them. So they call it detailing. You go on and you talk to doctors about arthritis and gout and depression and things, and how wonderful your drugs are and how horrible the opposition's are. And if they take the opposition's drugs, your legs will fall off, but yours don't cause impotence. Honest God, And I did that and managed to save some money. So I thought, I wouldn't mind doing a bit of travel. I'll go around the world, and I only got as far as Australia.
Never turned back.
Yeah.
All right.
And then when I got to Australia, I thought I'll try something different. I'll get into computers. So I went along to IBM and sat all their aptitude tests and passed them. And they said, "Oh, you're quite smart. You can start in a couple of months. Can we just see your visa?" And I said, "Visa? Visa? Oh no, we don't take people on a temporary visa." So I joined Burroughs, and they didn't ask me. So that's how I got into computers, and then it sort of went from there.
So IBM missed out.
I don't know about that. I'm not sure I would have fitted in with IBM. They're a bit corporate for my tastes.
I'm with you on that one. So we have a lot of people who sort of register as on sales players who are actually rookie status. Let's say they've got less than 12 months experience in sales, maybe only a few months, some of them 0. And a lot of those people as well are out there applying for a lot of jobs, trying to get their first real sales job as well. And of course, they're getting filtered out by HR candidates or whatnot, filters. What advice would you give to somebody like that who doesn't have sort of much experience in sales, keeps getting knocked back on job applications? What advice would you give somebody like that to go out there and get their first sales job?
Well, I can see that it is tough at the moment, especially with all these automatic programs that look for particular words and experience, and you don't even get your resume in front of someone. Having said that, you're asking someone who's 70 to give advice to someone who's 50, who's 20, 50 years younger than me. So it's easy for me to pontificate from afar. But getting that first job is in itself a sales job. It's a sell. You've got to sell yourself. And if you go through the normal processes, the chances are that's going to happen, unless they're specifically looking for trainees with experience in a particular area or that have got a particular level of education. I think it is pretty tough. So the question is going to be, okay, if I want to get a job with this specific company, what do they need, and what have I got that they need? Because the essence of sales is understanding what the other person wants. So if you want to get into sales, okay, what type of sales do I want to get into, and why do I want to get into that sales, and what? Because sales spans everything from saying, "Would you like fries with that?" in McDonald's, through to selling aircraft carriers to Ukraine. So there's a massive range of sales jobs, and obviously if you're starting, you've got to start, if not at the bottom, fairly low down, and work your way up. And by up, I don't mean necessarily through a company. I mean through a couple of jobs. But the question is, what skills have I got, and what companies need those skills? And then when you find those companies, how can I show them that I've got the skills they need, and perhaps bypass the recruitment process if I'm not getting through that recruitment process?
Yeah.
There's many ways to do it. If you've got a mate that knows someone, that always helps. If you can go directly to the sales manager and show them that they've got a bit of initiative, that helps. But it's a big question, and I do have sympathy for people that try and get into sales.
Yeah. No, good tip. Definitely. I think trying to skip that process of going through the automated filters is definitely one way, and it's also a good way of showing that you've got a salesperson in you, right? And especially if you can get directly to the hiring manager, that shows there's something about you that you can do that, and you're prepared to try that at least. So good.
Well, that's right. And if you can find out who the hiring manager is, and you can find something out about them, and you find out that they're like rugby union or something else like that, you can use that. It's not going to get you the job, but it shows you made an effort.
Yeah, you get in the door, right? That's what it's all about in sales, right? Yeah, getting in the door. Cool. Thanks for that. Really good advice. All right, so moving back onto the topic of today. We crossed on a LinkedIn post a couple of days ago from I'd seen a post from Brian at Sales Loft. I created a quick poll on the back of that in regards to should SDRs get paid commission on the final sale. So SDRs, just so everybody knows, that's a sales development rep who basically books meetings for an account exec, who then goes and does the rest of the sales process and closes the deal. And you pinged me with a message on the back of that, of course. And just to give some context before we dig into this topic in regards to your background, my background, so you know where we're coming from. Brian, by the way, is an SDR himself at SalesLoft. So I think at SalesLoft, they're probably middle ticket value kind of products. Steve, your experience is in big ticket values, sort of $250,000 and upwards. My background experience comes from sort of transactional sales, if you like, into sort of the mid-market and some larger company sales. So of course we've got there's different context, I think, coming from both of our sides, which I think will be interesting to obviously debate and discuss to figure out how that differs. So I just wanted to give that context there to everybody listening, so you understand obviously when Steve's coming forward with some ideas, opinions, what that's based on, and you can take that into account based on whatever you're out there selling for, whatever value, because it's super important to understand that what works for one might not work for the other, depending on what you're selling and especially what value you're selling and who you're selling it to. So you sent me a message on LinkedIn and you had a few bullet points where you said you'd love to discuss them. That's why we're here today. The first one was, how should SDRs work and should they exist at all? I'll just go through all the list and then we can rewind, go back. Second one, how should commission work and is there a better way? Next one, if yes to A and B, should SDRs get commission on those closed sales? D, if so, should people also like pre-sales also get a commission on closed deals because they're of course also part of that process? And then final bullet there was the merits and demerits of team-based selling. So yeah, let's roll back and just start with that first one there. Sort of, how should SDRs work and should they exist at all? Interesting point. That I'll let you take the floor.
Okay, we'll talk on that. Before I do have some small business sales. My wife had a catering company and then a beauty salon, so I did help her with sales as well. So I've got some very low value sales experience too, but it's mainly that they're higher value. Look, pardon me. The original concept of an SDR. First of all, my answer to almost every question is it depends, right? Because everything's contextual. But the original concept of the SDR was this: account executives I get a lot of money and their time is valuable, and we don't want them to spend all of their time prospecting and looking for and trying to qualify people. So we'll get someone else to do that job, and then once we've qualified that there's a lead there, we'll pass it to the account executive to follow up. That's the basic concept of SDRs.
Yes.
Right? And as you said, my background is high ticket sales, which means that you're looking at talking to senior executives, because the people that make the decisions are the people who can make a decision to spend $250,000 or $2 million, at the office junior.
Yep.
So the question I've got is, if the person you're trying to get to is a senior executive or senior decision maker in a large corporation, do they want to talk to someone who's essentially a trainee salesperson or a junior? Because a lot of the SDRs are seen as being one step on the career path towards becoming an important account executive. And a lot of the content, and I work with a company that does a lot of nurturing. They actually, rather than just try and find leads, they actually nurture people until they talk to them about their business, all the things they do, and then when they're eventually ready to look at something, they've got that relationship, and that's a bit different from the SDR concept. The SDR concept is more, have you got a budget? Have you got when you're going to start looking?
Yeah, your classic. Your classic qualification questions, what you go through, regardless of what you're selling, right?
Yeah. The problem you've got, if you look at a large organization that's going to buy, now, I don't know, CRM as an example, right? Or whatever it might be. Nobody gets up in the morning and says, I know what shall I do today? Oh, I'll go out and buy a CRM, or I'll go out and buy a battleship or anything, A lot of stuff happens. They say, okay, well, we've got a problem. I mean, China's expanding its influence in the Southeast Pacific, and we need to, we don't want to get invaded, so we better look at the ways to defend ourselves. I mean, I'm taking this to the extreme, but it's the same concept. We better find a way to defend ourselves. And I think, well, what should we do? Should we get nuclear bombs, or should we buy battleships or submarines, or should we just let China invade us and become part of China? Or I'm not picking on China; it could be anyone, But the point is, you get a problem. It's a business problem, and the type of solution to a business problem. There can be many different solutions. If your basic problem is we're not selling enough, pretty basic problem, there are many ways to fix that. You can buy a CRM, you can buy some business intelligence software, you can hire more salespeople, do sales training, reduce your prices, increase your prices, get rid of customers. There's a heap of stuff you can do to sell more, right? And then eventually they said, well, look, what we really need to buy a new CRM, because that's what's holding us back. We're not getting the information. So we need, and that's and then they say, okay, well, which one we're going to buy? We'll go out to the market and see what's there. So someone that's not the executive goes out and they talk to Salesforce and all these other people about CRMs. And then they come back and then they say, okay, well, how much is it going to cost and how long is it going to take? And then at the end of that process, you get a budget and you get a project, right?
Yep.
Now, if you're not talking to people until all that's happened, you've had no opportunity to influence it whatsoever. So maybe you don't sell a CRM, maybe you sell sales training, and sales training is what they need, but you never got a chance because they didn't go down that path.
Yeah.
But if assuming they did go down the path that leads to you, they've already talked to people, they've already done the research, and they've already got a reasonably good idea in their mind what they want to do. So if you're getting into that sort of deal at the stage where they've already decided which way they're going to go, how much it's going to cost, when they're going to do it, it's a pretty good chance someone else has been talking to them for 3 months, for 3 years. So that's one of the flaws with the SDR process. And the other thing is that, let me ask you a question, right? You're a sole trader?
Yeah.
You work for yourself?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not, you're not gonna make anyone rich by buying $1 million product off them. But you're on LinkedIn. So how many prospecting calls and prospecting emails and connection requests do you get every week through LinkedIn or through all different methods?
Yeah, every day, right? Okay. About something different. Yeah.
Now, assuming that you're the CFO of a $100 million organization, how many do you think they get? Because they're not just, because when I'm an SDR calling to sell accounts receivable automation software, and I'm calling the CFO because that's the person I think will buy it, right? I'm not only competing with everyone else that's selling AR software, I'm competing with anyone that wants to sell them anything.
Yep.
And I'm not only competing with anyone that wants to sell them anything, I'm also competing with anyone else that wants a bit of their time. So their board, their direct report, their team, their wife, their dog, anyone that's after a slice of the time, I'm competing with them. So from the perspective of the customer, they're overwhelmed with LinkedIn messages, with calls and everything, and they turn off. So that's one of the big flaws with the SDR process. And the other flaw is that if you get through, unless you can talk to them intelligently in their language about their business problem, why should they answer your questions? Who wants to be qualified by a 25-year-old SDR? Yeah,
so, it's an interesting point. It's just to sort of interrupt there. Like there's almost, if you look at the value of what you're selling, right? I mean, you need to be selling something of a specific value for an SDR team to even make sense in a business to start with. And then you've got this middle part where you're selling something to mid-market, SMBs, etc. It's a bit higher value where you're like, okay, now it makes sense to have an SDR team because I can afford one, because the order values say I've got enough money, because the end result is obviously going to pay 10 times whatever I put up front. But then it seems almost like when you go bigger and higher ticket, then the need for those SDRs kind of changes rather than disappears, I think. And it's interesting because I follow a lot of SDRs. I know a lot of SDRs, and especially on LinkedIn, I pay attention to the SDR space because it's shifting, it's adapting, especially with the new generation. And let's face it, nobody likes making cold calls. And social selling's been around for a long time now. Social selling's been done badly for a long time. But what I've seen is there's a shift what's happening right now. And there's a shift in almost that. I've always said that salespeople whether you're an SDR or whether you're a full cycle rep, I always said your brand awareness. That's your key. If you want to get in front of somebody, it's about brand awareness. So when you're doing your outreach and whatnot, whether it's a call, whether it's an email, whether it's a LinkedIn message, whatnot, it's not about being pushy. It's about your name being there, and whether your logo is
I'm
here,
going to disagree with you there.
Go for it.
Okay, because let's face it, on a scale of 1 to 8 million, how much do you care about someone's brand? I don't give a toss. And the fact is, if you're looking at brand awareness and you sell I'll give you an example. I used to sell ERP software to publishers, and the company when I joined the company, I had 15 people. We were smaller ERP developer in Australia, and we were competing with, well, it was different companies back then, but with the equivalent of IBM, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP. And there was no way on God's earth that our 15 people company could possibly create any brand awareness in the companies at large. So we actually focused on a couple of specific niches. We built a bit of an awareness because we focused on those niches. But the thing I think the awareness, I think, needs to be the other way around. It's not a question of making them aware of you. It's a question of you being aware of who your target market is and what they really care about, and focusing about those things. So it's the other way around. Because as I said, nobody cares, unless you happen to wear Tommy Hiflinger or whatever his fake name is on your chest. No business person cares about your brand whatsoever, until they potentially believe you can help them. And once they think, okay, this person might be able to help me solve a problem I've got, then they might care. Well, are they big enough? Are they important enough? Are they well known? But trying to get through to them in the first place, no one really cares. And if they do, they care about the big ones.
So I suppose what you're talking about there is actually, and this is another problem. This is probably a completely separate problem. That's knowing your ICP, knowing who's your ideal customer profile, right? Because you've got a lot of companies out there, they're really bad at this. They think they know it, but they have absolutely no idea. I know that because I used to work for a company where we focused quite a lot on ICP, because that was part of what the platform did. And whenever you ask companies, do you know your ICP? Everyone always answers yes. And then we ask them, okay, what is it? They've got this super broad, like, oh yeah, we target companies above 50 employees.
Anything that moves.
Anything in Europe or Australia, whatever. And you're like, okay, so that's not really an ICP, right? Because then you've
it's like the French approach to food and sex. If it's dead, you eat it, and if it's alive, you bunk it. You know. But I had someone say to me, nice guy, good, knew his stuff. But I was talking to him, and I said, "Who's your ideal customer?" He says, "Well, any company with more than 1,000 seats." And this is in the USA. And I said, "Well, how many of them are there?" And he said, 10,000. He said, at least. And I said, "Well, how many of you are there?" He said, "There's one." I said, "Well, there is no way on God's earth you can target 10,000 people. Why don't you just pick the top 100 in New York where you live?"
Yeah.
And focus on some industries where you've got. But the thing is, it's not that hard to work out your ideal customer profile, because unless you're a startup, your ideal customer profile is pretty much based upon the customers you've already got. Who have you got as customers, and who's like them? That's But the thing is, if you don't know who you're targeting, nothing else works, because you spend I always say that if that good salesmanship isn't selling ice to Eskimos, it's selling ice. It's finding people who need ice, like butchers and people in deserts.
Yeah.
So targeting is the essence of sales. If you don't know who has business issues that you can solve, then you can't do anything else.
No.
Now, when it comes to SDRs, you said they're a different level. Look, I am not against people using the phone to contact prospects. It's the way it's done. And the question that people asked when they came up with the SDR model was, how can we take some of the loads off the account executives so they can spend more time selling? And that was a good question, but they came up with a bad answer. Because what they did, they took the most difficult part of sales, which is starting the initial conversation, and gave it to the least experienced people. And
So
when there's a lot of things that you can do with unexperienced people. Once you know your ideal customer profile, you can come up with a list of who the companies are. You can do research on who to call. You can make sure the people that call actually work for the company and didn't leave 3 months ago. There's a lot of preliminary research you can do that. Then you can think, okay, well, I'm not, what are the business problems that I solve? I'll give you an example. One of my clients sells accounts receivable automation software, and the things that their prospects care about are day sales outstanding, it's collections, it's not calling the customer to hassle him to pay you when he's already paid you, but you haven't allocated the cash because your cash allocations are a week out of date. There's a heap of business problems like that you can talk about. It's not, gosh, we've got this wonderful software. It's, do you have a situation at the end of the month where your AR people are working 20 hours a week to allocate all the cash so that you can close the month off?
Yeah.
And then once you understand those problems, then you're in a position to talk to people intelligently about the problems in their language. But the people that are doing that calling have to understand the business problem they're talking about. They don't have to be as smart as a CFO or as smart as a head of AR, but they need to know enough about it to talk about the problems in the language of their prospect so that they can build that rapport.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff you can get trainee salespeople to do that doesn't involve them calling up, trying to qualify people and say, how would you like an AR automation package, please, mate? And have you got a budget?
Yes. Yeah.
No,
I get it. I completely get it.
Yeah. So should they exist? They certainly shouldn't exist if they're being used as a training ground until people get more experienced, because to be honest, they piss people off when they call them.
Yeah, most of it, yeah, 100%. I mean, they work off the same thing as probably what we worked off when we was earlier in our careers. It's the same numbers game, right? It's, yeah, but if we're selling especially when you're selling big ticket, a lot of companies have this attitude of, but if you sell big ticket, you can make 100 dials, you can piss 98 people off, but you're gonna get through to those 2, one of which might buy, and then we get this big ticket.
That's actually, there's nothing wrong with that except for one thing. If you were the only company doing it and you had an infinite number of prospects, so you could afford to piss off 98% of them, that would be no problem. But you're not the only person doing it. You're one of 8.5 million other people that are doing it. So these prospects are getting the 98% that are pissed off aren't pissed off once. They're pissed off 10 times a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the problem. Everyone only looks at it from their own perspective. They don't look at it from the perspective of the people they're speaking to, and they don't think of the fact that everyone else is using it as a numbers game. Same with it's basically phone spam. I mean, emails became spam because everyone was sending. It became easy to send out hundreds of thousands of emails or millions of emails, and so we got flooded with emails. And then we got spam folders, and now the first thing I do every day, and I work for myself, so I'm a one-man band. But even so, the first thing I do every day is I go into my 2 main email addresses and I delete 50 emails without reading them.
Yeah,
and it's the same with LinkedIn. How many? I say, LinkedIn. I'm getting connection requests and emails and everything all the time, which I just don't even look at. Yeah, I had one the other day. It was great. I had an email the other day saying, "Dear Steve, please let me know if you'd like to sign up for our course on selling to executives." And I said, "No." And I said, actually answered that one. I said, "Well, no." I said, "If you want me to run it for you, I'm happy to do that."
Yeah, that's it. You get some random ones through, right? It's like, did you even look at my profile? It's like, clearly not, because they're just going for the volume game, right? So from
that perspective, SDRs, I think, shouldn't necessarily do it that way. But if you can give the SDR the skills to know how to call effectively, to know how to build a relationship by talking about issues that the customer has in their language, how even if they aren't looking, you have a reasonable conversation so you don't piss them off, because sometimes you might want to go back to them.
Yeah.
If you put in the research beforehand to winnow out all the ones that are too big, too small, wrong industry, don't have accounts receivable. If you sell accounts receivable software, I mean, you're not going to sell accounts receivable software to a supermarket because they don't have accounts receivable, right?
Yeah.
So if you put in the research up front to narrow down the 20,000 companies to 2,000 companies, and then if you do enough research to understand what the perspective of the people you're calling is on the issues that you send, and then you call and have an intelligent business conversation, even if they say, "Oh, look, we're not really ready," or "We've already got one," they're not going to be upset because you haven't just tried to see if they're a big enough fish to keep off, but you want to throw them back.
Yeah.
So, and if you and yeah, I know a number of companies now that hire experienced sales guys in their 50s and 60s to do the SDR role, but in the context of talking and building relationships. Because the other thing is that if you're selling an X at any one time, even if you've got the right list, only 5% of the people are actually looking right now for what you sell. So what do you do with the 95 that aren't looking now, but that will be looking at some stage? You just forget about them until next time, or do you put them into a program where you build a relationship until they are ready to start looking?
About the nurture, right?
Yeah.
Timing. So sales, I mean, timing is everything in sales, right? You can put in all the effort you want today, but at the end of the day, literally most of the people you reach today, the timing's going to be wrong.
Well, that's right. But the question is, if the timing's wrong, if they bought one yesterday and they only buy one every 10 years, well, the timing's really wrong, right? But if they're not, oh, we can't buy your ERP this year because we're building a new warehouse. So I didn't say, oh, damn that, I'm never going to talk to you again. I said, oh, no problem, I hope it goes well. And I call them, how's the warehouse going in a year's time? Oh, well, we finished the warehouse, now we're ready to talk about ERPs. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the biggest sell I ever made was a company I'd been talking to for 10 years. You can't make someone buy to your timetable. You've got to be prepared to fit in with their timetable. Now, to the next question, what was the second question? Should SDRs exist? The answer is not in their current form, in my opinion, but my opinion is not going to change the way the world works. Okay. Secondly,
it's all about sort of a contextual thing from somebody's point of view, like you, who's obviously got a lot of experience. You're selling bigger ticket products as well. It's quite an interesting shift there for me, at least from when you take from selling to small businesses to stepping up where you can have SDRs and it can justify its value, to all of a sudden that value almost diminishing, in your opinion, as it gets even bigger. But again, it's like you say, I think the key takeaways, at least from this first piece, is when you say in their existing format, right? I believe it is. There's a debate on as well inside of organizations about should SDRs belong to sales or marketing, and that's where the brand part comes in, because I do believe that if you've got your ICP right, then an SDR team is a brilliant brand awareness tool, and that's the shift. What I see in the approach of a lot of SDRs today, they've gone very social and they're online and they're not pushing product down your throat. They're just visual and they're out there. And that's where the brand awareness kicks in, because if somebody mentions a company to you, you're like, oh, actually, yeah, because I've seen that person in my LinkedIn feed. I've heard of that company somewhere before. It's the same as
from that perspective. Yeah, from that perspective, I would agree with. I wouldn't call it brand awareness. I would call it company awareness. And I would say that you, and even personal awareness, you need to build a relationship and a reputation that you understand their problems and you're worth talking to.
Yes.
It's not about gosh, it's not about gosh, this company does great stuff and they've got a great brand. It's gosh, this company understands me. When I want one of what they sell, I want to talk to them.
Yeah, but I think it's also about that person, right? If you've seen that, it's like you say, you're one of 50 people every day who's spamming somebody in their inbox, whether that's on LinkedIn or in their email. But if you're that person who they've seen in their feed for the last 6 months, and you've not forced anything down their throat, then all of a sudden they have this, I've actually seen this person's feed a couple of times, seen a few posts up, and they seem like a nice person. So it gives you that personal advantage that makes you stand out.
But what you're talking about now isn't the traditional SDR role. SDRs don't.
But that's what I see. That's the shift. What I see right now in that SDR role is a lot of them are focusing on doing that.
But if they're going to do that, they've got to be they've got to be seen to be credible. So it's not, again, it's not a question of oh gosh, my widget's good. It's a question of we have a client that had this problem where their cars kept running off the road, and they found one of the problems was the widgets were only being replaced once every 6 months rather than once every 3 months, and stuff like that. And that means you've got to have you've got to have the domain knowledge.
They're trying to do social, but they're not there yet with that. What can I say? Not all of them are there with that intelligent social posting.
That's right, and it's not. I mean, and you can comment on. I commented on your post. You can comment on posts, and you can build. You can show that you really understand your stuff, or you can also show that you're a total plonker. And again, if you're gonna try and build a relationship and get noticed by people, you've got to get noticed for the right things, not for being a dingbat.
Exactly.
Back when I was first selling publishing software, it was an ERP, but we focused on publishers and consumer electronics. I would send direct mail, which is the equivalent of in-mails and emails this time, on paper. But it wouldn't be, oh gosh, we've got this wonderful ERP. It would be returns management. A lot of publishers have challenges with returns because this happens and that happens, and when returns come into the warehouse, you've got to put them back, and you've got to do the cash allocations from all of the claims that result from the returns. And I would talk about the returns process and some of the problems that our new publishers had, and how potentially you could solve them. And I'd say, our PSM, our software really does this. And I would send them letters on different topics every 3 months. And I'd personalize them by writing in the margin, oh, hi, Bill, we're sending this out to customers and I thought you'd be interested. So that was the personalization. And on 3 or 4 occasions, I had people call me after a year or two. Oh, I'm going to see someone. They say, oh, yeah, I've still got your letter here. Because it was about them and their stuff, not about me and my stuff. Exactly. And that's the sort of thing you're talking about, but it's got to be relevant. There's no point talking to the head of AP about accounts receivable and vice versa.
No. Exactly. Cool. So let's I think we've grumbled enough now on that first topic. Second one, of course, is the one, sort of the main topic, if you like, is how should commission work, and is there a better way?
Well, I personally don't like commission. I've made a lot of money on commission in my time, but I think commission drives bad behavior. I think unless you handle it correctly, commission tempts people to sell too much. It tempts them to oversell. It tempts them to overpromise. And if you've got a situation where the person making the initial sale buggers off and leaves it to an account manager to follow up on, or to an implementation team to do, it's a recipe for disaster. So I much prefer a team bonus system where a team of people work together on different sales projects, and the entire team, if not the entire company, but certainly the entire team, shares a bonus. And they may share that bonus in different proportions and different levels, but they get paid based upon the success of a team. Having said that, once again, I'm not going to change the way the world works, but the challenge from the SDR's perspective in the traditional format of should I get a commission if I open the door, is there's an awful lot has to happen after that door opens, and you're relying on the salesperson to do the right thing and on the good handover. That's one of the big problems with the SDR model is the silos. The SDR does this much, and he hands it over to them, and then they hand it over to them, and there's no continuity. But from an SDR perspective, I'd love to get commission as long as it doesn't mean I get less. As long as it doesn't mean that I get less base salary. And again, the things that the SDRs are judged on, calls and meetings and things, aren't necessarily driving the right behavior, because you're tempted to give people meetings that are crap meetings, to tick in the box. That's why marketing and sales have to work together. When you talk about should SDRs work for marketing or sales, well, if marketing is judged on clicks and on views and on email opens, and if SDRs are judged on numbers of calls made and numbers of meetings, they aren't necessarily the metrics that get the sales. No. So I prefer everybody to be judged on the same metrics. The main one is revenue. And so I'd say let's work together as a team, so that if I think if I can get a meeting, but I know really it's a waste of time for the sales guy, I'm not going to create the meeting, because it's a rubbish meeting. It's going to waste his time, and he's not going to make the sales, and I'm not going to get my bonus.
Yeah, completely agree. That whole sort of, let's call it most companies' dream of sales, marketing, working as a unit, working towards the same goal. Some companies are trying it. It's difficult. It is difficult. I think that, again, that's due to tradition, right? I think marketing are always focused on this, and this, and it's difficult for companies to understand who's doing a good job. Because if the person at the end, for example, the account exec, usually, who's the person actually closing the business, if they're not up to the job, then of course that looks like everybody's failing. And I think companies have a problem with that, because then they can't measure. They're always looking for the blame, right? Who's the one to blame? So I think that takes away a little bit of that control about where do I need to fix the process, which I think is where all these metrics come in, which are different to each other. But I think that's also why I'm a supporter of the SDR being part of that commission. I love the idea of everybody being part of it. That's definitely something I would, if you can make that function, that would be brilliant. It does have that little end issue there of the fact that, but if that AE isn't up to the job, everybody's going to be impacted on that. Maybe that exposes faster, right? Maybe it's a good thing.
So the problem with that is we still think of the account executive as the Lone Ranger riding into town with a 6-gun and finishing off the baddie. But in fact, someone has to feed the horse, and someone has to make the bullets, and someone has to saddle the horse, and all of these things. So it is a team effort. We just don't see it as a team effort. My preferred model, again, it depends. It depends on what you sell, who you sell it to. But my preferred model is you've got someone that does the research that helps find which companies you're going to target, and they may sit in marketing and sit elsewhere, but they actually work with, they talk to, actually talk to with your voice, talk to the people that make initial contact. And that initial contact could be via LinkedIn, it could be via the phone, it could be via email, it could be via driving up to the office and saying, hi, here's Bill in. There's many different ways you can make that initial contact. And then you've got to the message, and the developing the message depends upon the role of the person you're talking to, the industry they're in, the business problem that you're solving, and the specifics of that company at this particular time. So the message for the company is developed by the team, which we may be marketing, but maybe also sales. And then when you're doing going through the sales process, you've got maybe the pre-sales people who do the demonstrations and things, and those people work in little commando teams. Yes. I call them Callisto teams. I just made it up because Callisto was a nymph that was the head, that part of the goddess of the heart, but that's irrelevant. But anyway, you have a little team, and you say, okay, it's a form of account-based marketing. For this set of people, we're going to have someone whose job it is to do the research, someone whose job it is to make the contact and build the relationship, someone whose job it is to manage the sales process, and someone whose job it is to support them in terms of demonstrations, technology and things. And they're all going to be a team, and they won't be working working at any one time, but they communicate as a little group of people. I mean, obviously, people will belong to more than one group, but this is the Telstra group that works on Telstra, and we all live and fall together, and we all share in the celebrations and the money when we win.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people as well are probably listening to this will probably think, oh, but Steve's like, he's super enterprise. He's talking about really enterprise stuff now, but that's actually not correct, because your order value doesn't have to be that big before you have to have a team, a unit on every sale, right? To have SDR, pre-sales, and account exec on there, it doesn't have to be that big. You can be selling something, I think, of 20,000 euros ARR, and you can still have a team like that on there. So I don't think we're not necessarily talking about enterprise sales only here. We're talking actually about even like mid-market, right? The MB.
Well, you are, because I mean, look, you've got marketing, you've got pre-sales, you've got SDRs, you've got account execs, right? You've got people that do those jobs, and there might be one person does all 4 jobs, might be 2 people, might be 3 people, but they're the jobs that need to be done. And the thing that happens is you need to communicate. Now, if you've got a marketing department of 10 people, a marketing department doesn't communicate. An individual communicates. Right. So if you're relying on the marketing department to communicate one message for all of the prospects, it's too general, it's too diffuse. So you need people in the marketing department working with people in sales on this project. And there's lots of little projects, and there can be 20,000 euro projects, or it can be 20 million euro project. It's the same principle.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. So next topic is, if yes to A and B, should SDRs get commission? I kind of think we've probably covered that one in B, right?
We have, and I think bonuses are better than commissions. But if it's commissions, I mean, you all work as a team. You should all be rewarded as a team.
Yeah. So you believe it's not a case of SDRs shouldn't get paid commission. You believe it should be looked at overall as to everybody should get a commission or bonus, whatever we want to use as terminology. Yeah. Good. So if so, I think we kind of answered the last one as well there in regards to the pre-sales piece. And again, I think sort of we're in alignment on that. I used to have that at the last company I was at, where I wanted to tag whoever's involved in influencing the sale. at the end of the day. I wanted to make sure they're tagged onto the end result, because for me, that was all about then everybody's working towards the end goal. I think I did a post as well the other day where I actually commented on somebody else's post and just said that, like, I felt like it's a bad sign from an overall company perspective if companies don't think like that, and if they have different departments working towards different goals without the same goal, then that tells you there's a problem within that organization. That the fact that, like, you're not thinking about the end goal, you're just thinking about micromanaging these different teams on different metrics. That's a bad sign for me, right? And I think that any company in their vision and their mission, they're working towards one goal. So that means that everybody in every team should be working towards one goal.
That's right.
So I'm a big fan of that model there, where whoever's involved in that process should get a benefit from that end process, whether that be a bonus, a commission, whatever it be.
Now, the argument you're going to get is it's basically a Skinner argument. You know Skinner, the psychologist. Which is pain and pleasure, reward and punishment. It's basically the philosophy is basically this: salespeople are intrinsically lazy. Therefore, we need to give them targets and measure their activities and make sure they do what they're supposed to do. We need to punish them if they don't make those targets by smacking them up across the backside of us, getting rid of them if they don't make the targets two quarters on the trot. And conversely, we need the carrot as well as the stick. So we need to give them commission to get them to do the job. That's the philosophy. And I believe that's a flawed view of human nature. I believe that most professionals, which hopefully salespeople are, and marketing people are, and everyone else is, professionals want to do a good job for the sake of doing a good job. And if you support them and give them the tools, they will do a good job, and they don't need to be punished for not making targets, and they don't need to be rewarded for making targets. So I think the measure activity and pay commission is a flawed view of human nature. And I was going to say something else there. It escaped me. But I think that people want to do. People want to do a good job. That's what the other thing is. People have got this view that sales is a shit job. You know, you've got all this rejection, and you've got calls, and you've got to do. It's a numbers game, and you've got to have 98 people reject you before one accepts you, and therefore we need to A, force people to do it, and B, reward them if they do it well. Hence the carrot and stick. And my philosophy is, no, let's not do that. Let's make sales not a shit job. Let's make sales a fun job where you achieve, if you research someone and you find out that, look, they went bankrupt last week, that's not a loss. That's some of the information you've won. If you call someone and you find out, oh, they bought what we sell 2 weeks ago, okay, that's a bummer, but it's not a failure. And everything you learn is a little achievement. And then it's much better to have lots of little positive achievements than the big 98% failures and 2% non-failures. So I think that there are ways psychologically to make people see sales as a fun, exciting job rather than a tedious crap job, and to pay people accordingly. No, get that. So the merits and demerits of team-based selling. Any other points you wanted to add on to that? What we haven't covered? No, I think we've pretty much covered all of it.
All right. Yeah.
I mean, look, I'll say one more thing. If you watch an action movie, or what is it, Force 10 from Navarone, or Mission Impossible, or the A-Team. I'm going back a long way now, right? Okay, but all these action movies. Sorry.
One of my childhood favorites.
Well, there you go. But in all of them, what do you have? You have one guy that's good at communications, and one guy that's good at explosives, and one guy that knows karate, and one guy that can hang upside down from the ceiling. You've got a group of people with different talents all working together to a common goal. That's what you do in every walk of life, except sales, it seems. And in sales, it's supposed to be, the gunslinger by himself, the gun. I mean, even said a gun salesman, right?
Yeah.
Well. That's not That's not how humans work best.
No. I think it's also an interesting topic, the overall commission in sales piece, especially because it's, again, I think there's a different breed. I always put salespeople into types. There's 3 different types. You got your hunters, your farmers, and your hybrids. Your hunters, I think they like the mess. They like the failure. That's part of what drives them, right? And I think that's why they also perform they perform a lot better in when doing lower ticket transactional kind of sales. Whereas sort of the hybrids and the farmers, they're more the patient kinds who like that. So it's I think I saw the Daily Sales channel on LinkedIn. You've probably seen that from Daniel Disney. I think he did a poll on his channel a couple of weeks ago in regards to would you work in sales if there wasn't a commission? And like the amount of, I think it was like 75% of people were just like no. And of course, Daniel always gets a huge amount of people who respond on that poll. So that was an interesting context there in regards to the impression of it. But of course, I think that again, it's like you say today. It's not about a yes or no, right? It's about a how. How should it look? If SDRs get paid commission, how should that model look? Should it be a bonus? Should it be a commission? Should it be team based? So a lot of good sort of food for thought. I think for some companies, people listening to this in particular, there to consider that.
I like Daniel, but that is a bit of a flawed question. I mean, the question should probably be: would you work in sales if you didn't get commission but got a much bigger base salary and got bonuses?
Yeah, context, right? Context. I'm always about context on everything as much as possible. Context. So good point. All right, Steve, it's been a pleasure. Before we wrap up, I wanted to I noticed a couple of days ago, maybe a day or two ago, you was throwing out a few push-ups on LinkedIn. You got a bit of a challenge there, raising some awareness for suicide awareness in Australia. Anything you want to share there where you want to get a few people helping you with that awareness? I know you've got what, 2-3 days left of that campaign.
Yeah, it's probably running out. I mean, it's the Push-Up Challenge Australia. So if people wanted to find me and send me lots of money, it's pushupchallenge.com.au, I believe, and then you just look for Stephen Hall with a PH. But it is getting a bit late. I mean, basically, there's a whole heap of people. They've raised $8 million so far for mental health and suicide awareness. And the idea is you're supposed to do 3,139 push-ups in 24 days. And the reason it's 3,139 is that's how many people killed themselves in Australia in 2020.
Yeah.
But I like to beat quota, so I'm currently aiming on finishing on just about 11,000 in 24 days. If this goes up before the 24th of June, they can certainly go there and look me up and sponsor me.
Yeah, all about the awareness. All right, super. Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining, and I'm sure we'll definitely cross paths and maybe do another session on another topic or two for sure in the future.
Well, let me know when this is ready. I'd love to see it.
All right, take care, Steve, and thank you everybody for listening to the podcast. And of course, we'll be back again with another episode soon.